Florida as one of its territories. Unfortunately, many of the indigenous peoples inhabiting Florida succumbed to diseases brought by Europeans. Displaced Creeks and other native groups migrated into northern Florida. They came from Alabama and Georgia, mixing with local cultures and forming a group that became known as the Seminoles. About this same time, runaway slaves fled to Spanish Florida, where the Seminoles accepted them. The farming skills of the former slaves became a real asset to the tribe. These new members of the tribe would become known as Black Seminoles. Soon skirmishes were breaking out between rogue settlers, slave catchers, and the Seminoles. Then in 1818, troops led by General Andrew Jackson invaded northwest Florida in an attempt to quell the uprisings. Spain expressed outrage over the invasion of their territory, but unable to defend it themselves, Spain ceded Florida to the United States under the terms of the Adams-Onis Treaty of 1819. These early skirmishes and battles are historically known as the First Seminole War. After becoming an official U.S. territory, settlers began migrating to Florida in search of fertile lands and opportunities. Skirmishes once again broke out. As tensions worsened, the settlers turned to the government for protection. In 1823, Seminole tribal chiefs were summoned by the U.S. government to Moultrie Creek, where an agreement was worked out setting aside 4 million acres in central Florida for the tribe. In exchange for the Seminoles moving to the reservation, the U.S. government would ensure that no new settlers would be allowed. This agreement would be enforced for 20 years and is known as the Treaty of Moultrie Creek. In 1826, an Indian agency was established under the leadership of Gad Humphreys near what is now Ocala. 1 year later, in 1827, Fort King was built to administrate the Treaty of Moultrie Creek, promote law and order, and to protect the Seminoles from immigrants. It was named after Colonel William King, who had commanded the 4th Infantry. 2 years of peace would follow, with the Seminoles gaining more confidence in both Agent Humphreys and the U.S. government. In fact, when the fort was abandoned in 1829, due to budget cuts in Washington, the Indians continued their peaceful relationship and never considered hostile actions against the abandoned fort. In 1830, Andrew Jackson, now President of the United States, convinced Congress to pass the Indian Removal Act, ordering the relocation of all remaining Indians to territories west of the Mississippi. In Florida, the Seminoles learned of this act in 1832, when summoned to a meeting on the Ocklawaha River near Orange Springs. Here, Seminole chiefs were coerced into signing a document which became known as the Treaty of Payne's Landing. Though accounts differ on the authenticity of the signatures, this treaty replaced the Treaty of Moultrie Creek and ordered the immediate removal of all Seminoles from Florida. As tensions rose, Fort King was re-garrisoned. Unhappy with previous agents, President Jackson assigned Wiley Thompson as the new Indian agent at Fort King, with orders to speed up the process of Indian removal. This agent would be no friend of the Seminoles. In a series of meetings at the fort, Thompson insulted the Seminoles and vowed to deal harshly with them if they didn't comply with the treaty. Agent Thompson noticed one Indian of lesser rank was gaining popularity among the dissenting factions of Seminoles. This son of a Creek Indian mother and an Englishman father had a birth name of Billy Powell. After migrating to Florida and joining the Seminoles, Billy Powell was soon given the Seminole name of Osceola, or Black Drink Shouter, a reference to his blood-curdling battle cry. White men pronounced his name Osceola. Osceola was a defiant Seminole leader who opposed immigration. In June of 1835, Agent Thompson, in an effort to get Osceola to change his mind and immigrate west, imprisoned Osceola at Fort King. When Osceola consents, he is released and presented a brand new rifle. But instead of leaving Florida, Osceola rejoins his tribe and prepares for war. On December 23, 1835, 108 soldiers under the command of Major Francis Dade leave Fort Brooke in Tampa on a march northward to reinforce Fort King. They never made it. 5 days into the march, on December 28, 1835, 280 warriors, led by chiefs Micanopy, Jumper, and Alligator, ambushed the troops on the Fort King Road near what is now Bushnell. Over half the soldiers, including Dade, were killed in the first volley. Many more were killed in the ensuing volleys. Only 2 soldiers, seriously wounded, would survive the attack. This historic event is known as the Dade Massacre. That same afternoon, Osceola and a group of warriors opened fire on Indian Agent Wiley Thompson and Lieutenant Constantine Smith as they walked outside the walls of Fort King. They then turned their vengeance on the Sutler store owner, killing Erastus Rogers and his 2 assistants. Soldiers inside the fort, thinking they were under attack, secured the gates, not realizing Thompson and the others had been killed. When the soldiers found Thompson lying dead outside the fort, he had 14 bullet wounds, some of which allegedly came from the same rifle he had presented Osceola as a gift. These 2 events, the Dade Massacre and the killing of Indian Agent Wiley Thompson, are believed to be the sparks that ignited the Second Seminole War. As the war lingered on, North Central Florida became a network of Army fortifications. Fort Brooks at Orange Springs, Fort McKay, later named Fort McCoy, Fort Drain near Irvin, Fort Izard near State Road 200 in the Withlacoochee River, Fort Fowl near the Sharps Ferry Bridge on the Ocklawaha River, and in the center of them all, Fort King, the southern command of the U.S. Army. Military roads, typically 20 feet wide, provided the network to resupply and move troops. The Fort King Road, connecting with Fort Brooks and Tampa, roads to Fort Micanopy, Fort McKay, and lesser roads and trails connected the rest. In May of 1836, with Seminole guerrilla warfare taking its toll, the U.S. Army once again abandons Fort King. This time, Seminole warriors ransacked the fort and burned it to the ground. 1 year later, in April of 1837, federal troops re-garrisoned the Fort King site and immediately started constructing a new fort. As shown in this excellent sketch by Lieutenant John T. Sprague, and supported by this fort plan found in the National Archives in Washington, D.C., this new fort included a square-shaped stockade, 150-foot square. 2 25-foot blockhouses were constructed on diagonal corners to allow for the defense of all 4 walls. Inside the stockade would be barracks for enlisted men, officers' quarters, a mess hall, kitchens, and 2 powder magazines. A second-story cupola over the barracks allowed a sentinel to signal approaching danger by ringing a cowbell. Walls of the fort were constructed using 18-foot pine logs, 12 inches in diameter, and split lengthwise to provide 2 pickets per log. Bark was removed to prevent insect habitat and reduce it as a fire hazard. The logs were placed 2 feet into the ground, round side facing outward. Batten boards nailed horizontally on the inside of the fort wall helped provide support. There was a main front gate and a rear gate, with the front gate facing roughly 10 degrees west of due north. A spring located 200 yards to the east of the fort provided adequate water for cooking, bathing, and watering livestock. Perhaps it was the sheer size of Fort King that helped persuade some Seminoles to attend peace talks. The talks were held at the fort by Major General Alexander Macomb in 1839. With questionable ethics, General Thomas Jessup ordered Osceola seized after he appeared under a white flag of truce. Osceola was put in chains, transferred to Fort Marion in St. Augustine, and eventually placed on a ship to Fort Moultrie in Charleston Harbor. Here Osceola died on January 30th, 1838, and is interred outside the fort walls. The last fighting at Fort King took place in 1840, when a scouting party was ambushed, with 3 soldiers paying the ultimate price. On August 14th, 1842, the Second Seminole War was declared over. No truce was ever signed, no winners ever declared. It is estimated that 4,000 Seminole men, women, and children were relocated to the Oklahoma Territory. Several hundred Seminoles escaped into the Everglades. Today, descendants of the Oklahoma Seminoles make up the Seminole Nation, while the Everglades Seminoles make up the Seminole Tribe of Florida. On August 15, 1842, the remains of soldiers who died in the war, including Dade's troops and 34 from Fort King, were disinterred and reburied under the Coquina Pyramids at the National Cemetery in St. Augustine.
Oh, cool.
Fort King was soon decommissioned and turned over to nearby settlers. In 1844, Marion County was created with Fort King designated as the county seat. The fort served as the first courthouse of Marion County before being dismantled by local settlers when they moved to what is now downtown Ocala. In 2004, the site was declared a National Historic Landmark by the United States Congress. It was purchased through a joint agreement between the City of Ocala and the County of Marion. A support group, the Fort King Heritage Association, was formed as a nonprofit advisory board to give assistance and financial support in developing the park for the enjoyment of all.
Cool. It's a different one as they put in. This one's cut longer, breaking out. These are
Coffee beans and salt.
Pipes.
Coffee beans, they didn't look very good today. No.
That sucks. You can't go up there.
somebody wrecked it.
Somebody probably fell off.
I wonder if this was like a supply thing.
I'm kind of wondering if it's like a blacksmith, like, because
If they made
the
if they made
bullets.
the bullets in here,
Could be. That sucks. You can't
and they didn't do much work in here, did they? Yeah, it was a hot one.
There are trails. We're gonna come back in December. We were told that they shoot the cannon off the first week of December, and then we'll do the trailheads.
But this isn't even original. This is how they go. So when he said they dismantled that, they dismantled everything. So that's the original, and that's it. read out these windows maybe?
I think they'd go top windows for, because you had better view.
I need to look out up there.
Yeah, but you have better aim from the top.
They had them up there.
And I feel sorry for the people down below. Dad, I need a cowbell.
That one up there?
No. Need a cowbell. Tell them that there's people and their enemies coming.
Let me see what. We're gonna get